Hospitality Meets is brought to you by RotaCloud, the staff scheduling app for hospitality teams. RotaCloud lets you create and share rotas, record attendance, and manage your team's annual leave, all in less time than it takes to make a brew. It can also make life easier for your staff, allowing them to check their rotas, request holiday, and even pick up extra shifts, all through the RotaCloud mobile app. Start your 30-day free trial today by visiting rotacloud.com/Phil and find out how much easier managing your team can be. Welcome to Hospitality Meets with me, Phil Street, where each week we take a light-hearted look into the stories and individuals that make up the wonderful world of hospitality. Today's guest is Stephen Lowy, CEO of AES and The Residence Apartments. Coming up on today's show, Stephen tells us how he likes to spend his time.
Wow, karaoke parties on a Saturday night in the bar.
Phil attempts to reignite an 80s novelty classic. A little bit of this and a little bit of that. And Stephen highlights that it's not all sunshine and rainbows.
And I got punched in the face and ended up with a black eye.
All that and so much more as we chat through Stephen's wonderful career so far. Stephen wears many different hats, and as a result there were wonderful lessons throughout our chat. I was so appreciative that he gave up his time. Once again, that final note, if you can take time to subscribe to the show and leave us a review, it really helps more than you know. Enjoy. And a huge Hospitality Meets welcome to Stephen Lowy.
Hello, how are you doing, Phil? Thank you for inviting me on this.
You're very, very welcome. I feel like I don't know why it's taken me this long to reach out to you to get you on the show, to be honest.
Oh, well, I'm not taking it personally, but no, it's very nice to be on. I suppose I probably have an unorthodox hospitality career and job at the moment, so it doesn't always crop up on hospitality radars.
No, but I'd like that. I like, because this has been one of the joys, I think, for me of doing this show is there is really no right or wrong way to build your career. And probably when you start out, you've got no idea really where you're going to end up. So to kind of read about your background a little bit and see that you have, and I mean this in the nicest possible way, a little bit of this and a little bit of that through your career, that just makes a more rich story, I would suggest.
Yeah, well, I mean, when I studied hospitality at university, my focus was more food, and I was really passionate about restaurants, and I'd worked in restaurants pre-university, and that was my route. And then, you know, by the time I came back from backpacking, I was running a 500-bedded hostel, backpackers hostel, and so it was totally different. But yeah, I think it's an amazing industry.
Yeah, absolutely, which is why we're here today.
Yes.
But I mean, you got stuck into your story a little bit there. We'll come back to that particular moment in time in a second. But actually, it's probably prudent that we tell the world who you are and what it is that you actually do. Obviously, you're Stephen Lowy, but what is it that you do for those who don't know? Yeah.
So my main role is I'm CEO of AES and The Residence Apartments. The Residence Apartments are luxury serviced apartments in London. We have 75 apartments under that brand. And AES is a study abroad provider and a housing provider to the American university market. So we have 250 plus student flats in London, but also do internships, academics. So we have faculty under our payroll. We have a tour operator division and a study centre in central London. And we look after about 4,500 students a year.
Right. Wow. Okay. Yeah. Well, I mean, before you got there, there's obviously a bit of a story to fill in as to how you got there. So take us all the way back. You mentioned that you went to university and a bit of travel, but how did you kind of choose hospitality, as it were, in the first instance?
Yeah. I mean, I think at school I struggled a bit, and sport was my love, as was food, but I didn't really have many food opportunities there. And it became apparent as I was doing my A-levels and I was at a very academic school, I was really struggling. I found it really, really hard to remember stuff in exams. And my family have been in hospitality for decades, even to my late grandma, who came on the last kinder train from Vienna and set up as a single mother a cafe on the Finchley Road in North London.
Right.
It's sort of been in my blood. My mum's side are Irish farmers, and so that's potentially where the food side comes from a bit as well. And one bit that I enjoyed of A-levels was in geography, there was a whole section on tourism. And I really was really interested in that. So Salford had a good degree in hospitality and tourism management, which combined both, and had the opportunity to focus on the hospitality side in terms of chefing. And I loved it. I took a year out before university and worked, and actually worked in a restaurant in Chancery Lane, started off as a waiter and became assistant manager within about 8 weeks. And I guess that gave me some confidence back, because after the A-levels I really had none.
Yeah.
And then, having the responsibility for a central London restaurant, most of the week was kind of amazing as a 18, 19-year-old. So I went to university more confident. And then the first week I was there, I found out I was dyslexic. They asked if I ever had any learning difficulties. And I said, I went to a very academic school and I was very good with projects and presentations, but I really found it hard with exams. And they're like, oh, have you ever been asked about being dyslexic? And my school didn't really accept that.
Right.
To be honest, I didn't even really know what dyslexia was.
Yeah, sure.
Back in 2000. And yeah, sat with an advisor on it, and they're like, you're dyslexic. And I was like, okay. I said, what does that mean? And they said, well, you can get more time in an exam. I went, I don't have the attention span for a long exam. But it made me understand that I wasn't thick, and that academically, if I learnt in a different way to everyone else, I could remember things and engage more, and therefore then just really enjoyed learning at university, of which I was sort of fearful of for the previous 5 years.
Yeah. Was that then, is there something in this as well? I mean, even though you've had I suppose, do they call it a diagnosis at this point?
Yeah.
So, but equally, you've gone into something that feeds your passion a little bit as well. So actually the learning experience comes a little bit more naturally anyway, because you're just more engaged with the subject that you're trying to learn.
Yeah, I think it was a bit of both. I mean, manual bookkeeping on paper, which is what I did, is not exciting. It still is not exciting.
Yeah.
But I just listened and learned in a different way, and I think I still struggle now with reading long books that don't, if I'm not engaged with it in the first 10 or 20 pages, I find it really hard to push myself through. Yeah. And that's partly attention span, but it's also with dyslexia, I feel it goes in, it doesn't stick. And I think when I'm passionate about stuff, you're right, it does stick better. But I think self-confidence sometimes, not arrogance, but self-confidence that, you can do things is great. And I didn't know I was dyslexic when I was running the restaurant, but I could, and I worked out how to do double covers on a Thursday and Friday lunchtime, which the chefs hated, but the owners loved.
Of course.
And yeah, I think it just helped. And I think Salford were, which is why I'm still very engaged with them, were great, and they really, really looked after me.
Yeah. Now, didn't something happen at Salford Uni?
We did, yeah. So what Salford is still to this day is a very good vocational university and great engagement with industry. So at the time they had a head chef who I'm still actually connected with, and he's retired, but I still see him when I'm in Manchester, Patrick Trodden. He had a sort of outside catering division connected to the university where we would do outside catering. So I did various things and served Coronation Street actors who had no idea, because obviously coming from London, I watched EastEnders. But I was selected by the university to cook for Prince Charles at a vocational training event that they held on what is now Media City. It was just loads of big marquees, and it was, maintenance and engineering and all these different vocations, and catering was one of them. And I got to cook in the VIP area with Brian Turner. And
nice.
Although I was on the vegetable section, I was very proud. The only unfortunate thing was I was captain of the football team, and we played away in Wrexham at Newey, and the match got a little aggressive, and I got punched in the face and ended up with a black eye, which
Did you deserve it?
It depends. My Welsh isn't very good, but anyway, the way my friends would say I probably did. But the lady who was doing all the front of house stuff actually put makeup underneath my eyes, so if I was to meet or shake hands with Prince Charles, which I had to, I didn't look like such a thug. Right. But yes, anyway, that was that story. But yeah, it was quite an amazing morning prepping all that food.
Yeah, and also for I suppose something as high profile as that, you'd probably talk about this a lot with a lot of people that come on the show. You don't realize what these moments are teaching you in the moment half the time.
Yeah, no, I think what was very helpful with Salford was that they had a number of faculty that were either recent or current in industry. And I think that made it so much more relevant with the experiences that you were getting and also explaining to us how lucky we were.
Yeah,
I think not. It's becoming experiential learning, which is what I do in my day job now. Is more known, but I think then hospitality was one of the few degrees where you really had live live experience, and I think the training kitchen we had every week that we were cooking and serving people, but these special events I think were magic and leave a long lasting impact on your career.
mm, yeah, absolutely. So from there, what happened next?
So I decided I wanted to go backpacking and worked summer in London and then set out on a journey where I bought a round the world ticket with my first salary in the summer and then saved up living at my mum's for about £4,000 or £5,000 and went around the world. So I travelled from Hanoi to Singapore by local buses, never spending more than $1 or $2 a night on accommodation.
Right.
Finished in Singapore for my birthday, where my parents kindly had bought me a night at the Raffles hotel as my birthday present, which was the first hot shower I'd had in a long time.
That would
And
certainly not be £1 or £2 a night.
that would have been more than, yeah. And what was funny is they didn't actually let us in because we came off this coach that we'd been on for 14 hours with a backpack, a vest, and flip flops and everything else, like a movie. And they're like, "Oh no, 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 hostels are this way." And I went, "Oh no, it's Stephen Lowy." And they're like, "Oh, we're so sorry." And then they came up with a cake and happy birthday and Singapore sling and everything. It was lovely. And then from there, I went to Australia where I lived and worked for about 4 months. Worked in an Italian restaurant there, which was really interesting underneath Sydney Harbour Bridge. Travelled around Australia on my own on the local buses, and then did New Zealand, the South Pacific, across America, and then I actually went back to Australia, and then realised I was too far from home and came back. So yeah,
Wow.
almost a year anniversary of me leaving.
Yeah, but oh God, what an amazing experience that must have been. And you went on your own, or were you with a group of people, or was it
I
just
went,
a
I went with one guy.
right?
We parted ways in Australia, and then another friend came out for a bit of it. I travelled Australia on my own, which was really interesting. It was a really good challenge of can you do stuff on not can you do stuff on your own because I was organising everything to be honest, but it was
Yeah,
more do you feel comfortable on your own? And I think in life, even particularly in a management role, it can be quite lonely, but I can deal with it, and I think actually that it was about 3.5 weeks. It was really helpful for that.
I can totally relate. The thing that I found, I did a 6 month stint of traveling around Australia, and I went out with my fiance, and we split up about 3 days in. So
Wow.
then I had this moment, this sliding doors moment where you say, okay, do I go home, tail between the legs, and just accept that this wasn't the right time to do this, or do we just make the most of this? And thankfully, I chose the latter. But the
Yeah.
thing for me was is that I always found in Australia that you might be traveling on your own, but you're never really on your own, especially if you're using hostels and things like that.
Yeah.
It's so easy to connect with people and just get a little friendship network
Yeah.
quickly if you need it slash want it. But equally, as you say, to have the moments of, I suppose, solitude and can also be really uplifting. And
It is. Yeah. Well, as I was saying, I found it hard to read books, but I bumped into some Americans on a boat, the Fraser Island boat, Early Beach, and everything else. When you go on the Great Barrier Reef, and I was just lucky. I was 22 or 23 at the time, so it was slightly older backpackers. It was only it was the ones who took the gap year pre-uni as opposed to the ones who took it after uni.
yeah,
And anyway, just chatting to these Americans, I would talk about the chefing and everything else, and I'd been working in Sydney, and they're like, "Oh, have you ever read a book called Kitchen Confidential?" And I was like, "No, what's that?" And they said, "Oh, it's a New York chef called Anthony Bourdain." So anyway, they gave me their book, and I read it, page to page, and I was like, this guy's amazing. And Prime didn't exist, Netflix didn't exist, and everything else. And then as I got a bit older, I started seeing this guy on Amazon Prime. I was like, oh, and then I watched his first series, and he must have been a month behind me, because he went to a lot of the places I went to in Cambodia and Vietnam and so forth. Obviously not backpacking, but going to some of the places, the street food places and everything else. Like, wow, and it was really grainy, non-well-produced footage.
Yeah.
And sort of, I would say, fallen in love with him, but he really became a hero. I love stories. I love storytellers, and I felt that he combined food and travel and people in such a beautiful way, where it wasn't cheesy and it wasn't a cooking show. It was more. And I've even got a food group with some mates that we set up through COVID called In Memory of Bourdain, where we go and eat every 3 or 4 months. I did some cooking classes for them through COVID, how to make fresh beignets and a few other things, and we cooked all together, because he talked about the joy of food and the joy of people, and I really trust that. And that was a moment that I was on my own. If I was not on my own, I wouldn't have read that book.
Right.
And that was pretty amazing.
Yeah. God, sliding doors moment again.
Yes, it was. Yeah.
I super inspirational human being, and absolutely taken too soon in such a tragic way as well. But in any case, so travel ticked, I suppose. You've ticked that box. The lure to come back home was there from your second stint in Australia. But so what happened from then?
Yeah, so we got the opportunity to set up a hostel in London with an Australian brand called Wake Up. They were based in Sydney Central, now grown across Australia, in a building near Paddington Station. There was short-term left on the lease, and the owners wanted to try something different, and slightly connected to my dad. And so, I sort of started that whilst I was in Australia, meeting backpacker agents, bringing Aussies to London. Never really done it before. Got back in, and I landed on a Sunday, and on Monday went into the building, and we started doing it, and we launched it two weeks later.
Right.
And it was amazing. First time I learned about SEO and digital marketing. Obviously, there wasn't really social media, but there was TripAdvisor. Understanding a volume-based business rather than, I worked at Chez Girard, the restaurant, in my gap year, and that wasn't, it was sort of mid-range dining, I think we call it now. It wasn't super high end, but it wasn't like huge volumes. And obviously 500 beds to fill every night was a challenge. Yield management, so we started flex pricing or very manually, web design and loads of stuff very quickly. When I left for traveling, you searched on Yahoo. When I came back, no one searched on Yahoo. They searched on Google. And I had to learn that, and I realized very, very quickly, probably within the first month, that digital marketing was going to transform hotels, and that having a good online presence, no matter what style of accommodation you had, having dynamic pricing like the airlines were doing was just essential. And that was 2004, 2005. And it was, really exciting.
Yeah. I suppose I'm not struggling to get straight in my head is that you've gone traveling pretty green, and you've come back and you're running a hostel, not just running it, kind of not building it as such, but certainly involved in that process in terms of getting it fit for purpose and ready to go.
Yeah, I mean, there was people on the ground here, and Stewie, who I still work with today, I'd met in Australia, and his visa had run out, and he had to come back to the UK, and he'd been working in the hostels in Australia for years and years, and so from an operations perspective, he was doing that, and I had to work out how to fill it up. And I loved marketing when I did my hospitality degree, but this is the real stuff. This was and it's not like today where you can learn anything online. It just clicked. It was a very cool brand to work with. It was very cheeky. The slogan was "Wake up with someone new," because in a dorm you did. We handed out free condoms. We pushed the boundaries, which in Australia, as you know from being there, is easy. In the UK, it's harder. But we were featured in Time Out. Even got interviewed for the Lady magazine because we created female-only dorms with posters of David Beckham and hair straighteners and curlers and everything else with ensuite bathrooms, so ladies travelling on their own felt more comfortable. And it was an idea we had locally in London, because we had a lot of females travelling, and created this. And when you got a cool brand, there's so much you can do with it. And I also realised the power of brand, not necessarily from a big brand perspective, but having a brand that you can make evolve and have a life and a personality. Because I felt at the time that a lot of brands were there, they'd been there so long, they hadn't developed, and just a bit boring. And this wasn't. I mean, it's so much fun with that brand. It was brilliant.
Yeah, absolutely. So you opened, you were, I suppose, learning as you go by the sounds of it at this point in time, not really with somebody above you telling you what to do, as it were, or giving you guidance. Was it kind of literally, I have to roll my sleeves up and just get my head around this?
Yeah, well, my dad's group were managing, my dad's hotel company was sort of managing the building, but we had to have our own bubble because it was so different to a hotel. The marketing was different, what we did was different, the happy hours, the £1.50 pints as it was at the time. It was just different. And so we built a bit of probably like Mourinho used to do with Chelsea, you build a cocoon where you don't really listen to what other people are doing. And we took advice where we needed it. But what was great about youth and student travel was that there's an amazing community that's still alive today of people who want to bring young people to London or the UK. And actually, you're part of you became very quickly part of an ecosystem, which was great fun. And so that helped a lot. And I learned a lot from Stewie from the operational point of view, and there was people in reservations. And I think, and I've continued to do it through my career, is this love of learning and want people who love to learn and want to improve themselves. And I think we did that. I think that it was bookings.org and Active Hotels at the time. And even in that period, all of our bookings came through fax, and so everything was changing so quick. And I was fortunate enough to willing to work, many hours of the day to keep everything moving, but also learn. What happened in 2005 was 3 momentous occasions, maybe four. Start with the most important, which I've learned the hard way, is I met my wife. I didn't always put that first, and I got in trouble for that. Number 2, I was in Istanbul in 2005 watching Liverpool win the Champions League, which was a very, very special evening, as you can imagine.
Yeah.
But then there was 2 that rocked really hospitality. 1, they announced the Olympics, and 2 was the underground bombs.
Right. Yeah. I mean, they were more or less back-to-back day after each other, weren't they? Yeah.
Yeah. And I was actually in a meeting with loads of other hostel managers in our hostel in London when the bombs went off. Right. And it was, London everyone left, apart from in the hostel. And actually there was a lot of people like, no, we're staying here, we're going to help rebuild London, sort of thing. And, we were close to Paddington Station, so we had a bit of a triage thing going on. We had 450 out of the 500 beds full. So we had parents phoning up. Mobiles weren't big then. We had a big chalkboard with everyone's names on, people who'd called and crossing them off, and touch wood, no one got hurt. Fortunately, one of our accountants was on one of the train, but he was dusty, but okay. I think that transformed London in many ways. I think the security-wise, but also in terms of hotels. And there were hotels that were famous then that are no longer around because it was so bad for so long. What I realised very quickly was youth travel, so those under 35, were more resilient in terms of their travel patterns than the luxury, or what I call the traditional tourist, as it was at the time, package holiday traveller, because they had time. And if you're there in a city for 2 weeks, 3 weeks, living in a hostel, if you couldn't see the museum that day, you could see it tomorrow, and it was about the people as much as the city. And so that whole year gave me a lot of ideas for what I did next with the hotels, and that creating brands that were connected with youth were really important, both from an employment perspective, but also from a business perspective of getting customers. Yeah,
well, a nice segue then in terms of what happened next. How did things unfold from there?
Yeah, so we had a bit of a dip. We went from about 95% occupancy to about 70, and then it slowly went back up again. And you may remember there was a big Live 8 concert, I think it was called, in Hyde Park. And we were so full. I mean, it was crazy. And then we started getting approached by 3-star unbranded hotels who wanted us to overbook into them. And we started doing that. And then I realized that there weren't really many brands catering for that mid-range. And also, again, going back to the boring thing, they're a bit boring. So I had an opportunity again within the group to convert one of the hotels that was a traditional Bayswater tourist class hotel, which there were many very low rate, high occupancy hotels.
I like the terminology tourism class.
Yeah,
That can cover a multitude of sins.
it can. But it was if you looked at the brochures back in the day, all the German holiday brochures, it was known as a tourist class hotel, which, as I said, it doesn't really mean anything.
Yeah.
5-star hospitality means having the right people in the right place at the right time, and that's exactly where RotaCloud can help. RotaCloud is the online platform that makes planning rotas, recording attendance, and managing annual leave easy. Its simple, drag-and-drop interface lets you create and share rotas with your team in minutes, while our built-in budgeting tools mean you'll know exactly how much you're spending on staffing before sending the rota out. RotaCloud also makes life easier for your staff, allowing them to check their rotas, request time off, and pick up extra shifts, all through the RotaCloud mobile app. Start your 30-day free trial today by visiting rotacloud.com/Phil and find out how much easier managing your team can be.
And embarked on the journey of creating our own brand, and eventually came up after having 100 names with a small branding company called The Youth Conspiracy. We sat in a room with 100 names in 10 different types of names, from traditional and functional to what we call cheese ice cream, the sort of Heston Blumenthal slightly out there, and came up with the name Umi. And we came up with the name Umi because the letters interlinked, and I wanted a hotel that connected the world, that anyone from anywhere felt comfortable. What we didn't know was when we Googled it, Umi means ocean in Japanese. And obviously the oceans connect the world. And so I was like, oh, this is perfect.
Yeah, accidental genius.
Yeah. So that was 2006. And we launched Umi in May 2007. Tripled the average room rate. We ended up with 45% of our business direct. We grew the brand to Brighton and then Moscow. Whole different story. That's a different podcast. Probably your after hours version. Through a franchise agreement, we built our own booking engine, and we did a lot of amazing things. We had a great bunch of people. I did a lot of work with hotel schools and other universities to give internship placements. So at one point between London and Brighton, I think 35 or 40% of all of our team were students doing internships from all paid internships from all over the world. The furthest we had was a student who came and did marketing from New Zealand, which was amazing. And we were just innovative. We changed our website every 6 months. We just did really cool things, really good events for customers. And people were turning up to a tourist class hotel in Bayswater and going, wow, karaoke parties on a Saturday night in the bar. It was just different.
Yeah.
And probably if I wasn't so operational, maybe that brand would still be going and we'd have taken on investment and grown it in a different way, or I'd understood growth, but I was just happy doing cool, fun things. And, as long as the team were happy and customers were happy, we got on with it. And it was great. We did breakfast from 6 a.m. till midday in London, and we did a coffee shop style breakfast. So we did latte art. It was all, green, rainforest approved coffee. We did a lot of stuff that people are now implementing now, including building our own booking engine, which was very novel then. And it worked really well, but it was, very proud. And a lot of the interns who work for me, I'm still in touch with, whether they're from Colombia or Holland, or I went to a Liverpool match actually with one of the interns from the Netherlands. We went to Bayern Munich, Liverpool at Anfield, which was pretty amazing. So, that was an amazing period of time.
Yeah, it sounds like you were kind of pushing boundaries a little bit, really, and I love the analogy to Mourinho there about cocooning yourself and not listening to the noise outside. You just focus on yourself really and what's important to you. But at the same time, it was almost like a little, I don't know, playground really, to try stuff and see if the market will like it.
Yeah, and I think we didn't have a lot of money, so we couldn't waste a lot of money,
Right.
and so I felt that the combined power of all the people there, and if they can engage with us, with me, and the other management team, we'd get ideas, and if we can implement the ideas, as long as they didn't cost a fortune, we could see if they work, as you said. And I think sometimes in hospitality, people are too magpie-like. I want an app for my hotel. Why? You've got a small independent hotel. You don't need an app. But I need one. Why? Well, because my competitor has one. I went, well, that's not the reason to do it. We were very conscious of that. One of the interesting things was, as we ended up getting so busy in Bayswater, we were going to book out. But then I realised actually we didn't want to book out because they no longer became our customer. So I was like, well, why don't we? Because I knew how the travel trade worked, and that a lot of people got overbooked and busy weekends, particularly the first weekend in December, which is a big holiday in Italy and Spain, and you'd have low rates, and all the agents used to use up their allocation, and then you end up overbooked. So that weekend we kept it spare, and we said, oh, £200 a night was our rate. So we ended up getting the overbookings. We ended up converting these people into Umi guests. And I was like, oh, this is cool. Then I tried to organise a local hoteliers association drinks, and no one turned up. Because again, they were like, well, they couldn't necessarily copy us because every time they would look, we were changing. But I also learned a lot from the big brands, some of the cool stuff they did, some of the not so cool stuff. And I think I learned mainly at the university to be inquisitive. And I think that's you see like the really cool 5-star hotels in London, you see a lot of them are tweaking the menus and tweaking things now because they're inquisitive. People say, copying is flattering, and it is, but also it's copying or getting ideas from other brands where you really feel that it fits into your market and your thing, not just because they've got it. And we did pretty well with it. And I think, stuff like STR and what's not wasn't really around for 3-star hotels then, but you could tell because you could tell on booking.com what people's rates were like.
Yeah, absolutely. So where does this take us to? What kind of yearage are we at now?
So we launched in 2007. By the time it got to 2012, the marketing department for Umi became what is now known as Umi Digital. And I had the same ethos with that. I'd spun it out as a separate business and sort of stepped back from management of the hotels and focus on management of the brand. And then Umi Digital really started to grow. We had the same ethos with young people. And it got to about 2015, and unfortunately the hotels got sold in London and Brighton. And the one in Moscow was when politically things started to change quite a lot, and the owners there were like, they were British, and they're like, we need to cut back. And that hotel was like 10-minute walk from Red Square, which is not the ideal place to be. Right. Fucking politics is changing. So the hotels became no more. So really put the effort into Umi Digital. And around that time, we hired an intern called Harry from the University of Bath. And as part, what's great is he's now the managing director of Umi Digital today.
Right.
And doing an amazing job running it. And we work from our heritage and sort of more budgety hotels, now working with some amazing 5-star hotels in London and around the world, doing websites and digital marketing and tech for them and programmatic AdWords. So it got to about 2017 where I'd been doing a bit of work for AES, for Anglo, and had come up with the idea for the residence. And again, there was a company with my dad, the board approached me and said, look, you've got all the skills, you understand education because you've been working with all these universities doing internships. Would you like to come on and try and grow AES? And I said no, because I had some consultancy roles and I was bouncing around a bit. But I said, well, actually, if I could grow the residence, then I'd be interested. And eventually they said yes, and I said yes. It was a protracted process, and it's 5.5 years now that I've been CEO of AES and the residence, and was fortunate enough to work with some people who'd worked with me in the hotels who were at AES, but also bring back some people who I'd worked with in the past at Umi hotels who'd gone on and done different things to sort of get the team back together again, and it's gone great guns. Get
the band back.
Yeah.
I love that because as well. I mean, that's a massive part of anybody's journey, isn't it? It's the people you meet along the way. And when you feel a connection to somebody and maybe there's some unfinished business there that, then when that business opportunity comes up and you can just see it, that they would be the ideal fit for this. It's just wonderful when all of that kind of comes full circle.
Yeah, and I think with hospitality, with people, not every, again, go back to Mourinho and Klopp. I wrote an article on LinkedIn years ago about the Klopp Effect on Liverpool, and I just finished recovering from watching Liverpool Dortmund, where we won 4-3 to qualify for the Europa League final.
Another classic. Yeah,
another classic. I've done all right with the games.
Yeah,
and also had a lot of connection still in Manchester, and Mourinho was in Manchester, and I said, for the right player, Mourinho is like the best manager. Love to be hated, in this cocoon and everything else. And I feel I'm probably, because I think Klopp he does create a cocoon, but in a more probably lovable way.
Yeah.
The effect that he had on the city of Liverpool was quite remarkable. And, the fact you'd go into a pub next to Anfield and get Bitburger on tap was just, he was that, he matched the brand. And I think that's what happens in hospitality, and that's why often teams will move around, like management teams move around at football clubs. And that's why I think they're so similar, because it's about that personal connection and that group of people's connection with the brand or the ethos of the business, or, whether it's a family business or a brand. And I think, there's a lot of similarities because of the people connections and the fact that you've got lots of different teams with different functions requiring different skills that need to try and all merge together in a brilliant way.
Yeah, and no one thing is more important than the other things that it coexist with in that process as well. Yeah. He's responsible for me for one of the greatest leadership quotes of all time, which is quite simply, we have to turn the doubters into believers.
Yeah.
And that was right at the beginning of everything. And that to me set the stall out. And this is we'll continue with the football theme because we're both football fans, but equally there is a lot of, as you say, crossover, and therefore there's a lot of leadership lessons we can learn from elite, capable people. Because effectively he's taken on an ongoing business that has one hell of a history behind it. So, and for whatever reason, it's just kind of lost its way a little bit in the run up to him taking over. And all of a sudden he takes over, and first and foremost, our priority is to get everybody on board.
Yeah.
To that this is the objective, and we want you to come with us. We don't want you to feel like you're not part of this, because you absolutely are.
And I think that's sort of because with my career since I came back from traveling, I was always going into, and I'm not claiming to be Jurgen Klopp, but when some people said, "Oh, you're an entrepreneur and everything else," I said, "Well, I don't know, but I like people and I like managing situations, and really, even though it's with brands, I've gone into existing businesses or brands and tweaked them or changed them, and I really enjoy. I mean, I didn't enjoy COVID and haven't enjoyed the inflation and everything else. I know it's jumping ahead a bit, but actually, when you look at Jurgen Klopp, it was understanding the brand, tweaking it, and maybe changing the methods and the ethos and management practices within the business, which ultimately football clubs are. And, AES has been going 50 years now, which, it's amazing that my dad set it up and it's been going. And, I was given fairly full reign to tweak things with respect to the fact that, a lot of our partners are US institutions that don't like massive change. But we have done, and I think over the last 5.5 years, we've really improved as a business. And, there's a lot more togetherness. There's a lot more thinking about stuff further ahead, planning, and we've grown, which I guess is the equivalent of rising up the table a bit in terms of in a football team. And I mean, I don't beat my chest at the end of a week and roar.
Not yet.
But I do love the teamwork, and when we sort out difficult situations and succeed, I think it's just a great team feeling of when I used to play football and other sports. It was like, that winning feeling.
Yeah, it's a special place to be a business which is firing on all cylinders, with everybody in it feeling like they belong and it's part of them as well, and that they want to give the best version of themselves when they come in to do a day's work.
Yes, yeah. And I think I listened to a high performance podcast with Gordon Ramsay, and
I still haven't listened to that one yet, actually.
yeah, it was really good. And the last takeaways, he said three things. One was be a sponge, which I totally agree with. Be a sponge, not a sieve. That was the chef who trained me at Salford, said exactly the same thing. Be a sponge, look around, absorb things, take things in. Two, you can't please everyone all the time. And that was something that I think as managers or leaders, people always try and do. It's quite hard to
Yeah.
do.
It's
Again,
draining as well, right?
yeah, it's the emotional attachment. And don't take things personally, take things professionally. Yeah, and that was also really interesting. Being part of a family business, working with family businesses, it's a very different emotional attachment for people. But also from team members into leaders, it's a different connection because it's not going up to a big, a share price. It's going to people, and so you can see it. And I think embracing that and finding the right people to be part of that journey is also really important. But when you win, feels even more important.
Hell yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Well, and also I suppose the realization that you can't always win. There's going to be moments that take you down as well as the ones that take you up. But if you've got a cohesive unit to deal with these things, then it definitely makes coming back up a lot easier.
Yeah, and I guess COVID was a great leveler for hospitality and tourism, and it was hard. I think there was a lot of personal pain for people, and there was also a lot of business pain for people, whether it's insecurity on jobs or people running businesses. And I think I was stayed in touch with quite a lot of both hotel managers and various others, and some cocooned themselves, not in a Mourinho way, but just thought, oh, I don't know what to do. And others were not necessarily out on LinkedIn, but willing to meet for a coffee or chat or whatever. And I think it was hard from a mental health perspective, a physical health perspective. I think it was hard to keep people's morale up when you didn't know certainty yourself. And that then shows the strength of a core team where you're willing to fight through it. And I'm very proud of all the guys who I work with who really, we did a lot of good things for the NHS and various other stuff, and engaged even though they were finding it difficult themselves with everything going on. And we did our town hall with the team earlier on, and I was still thanking people for what they did through that, because you could see the figures and how things dipped, but the dip could have been worse if people wouldn't have engaged.
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, obviously a terrible time, but a lot of good stuff came out of that time as well. If nothing else, it gave people a little bit of a circuit breaker to really analyse them and what's important to them. And I don't mean that even just from a personal perspective, but businesses as well.
Yeah, I mean, we tweaked a lot. We still operated throughout because we had apartments. We were able to rent them out, key workers, various other things. We gave 50 apartments free to the NHS, which I did through Twitter. When there was doctors and nurses being kicked out of their flat shares, we were offering out to them. And we had buildings we still had to look after. And hotel managers and people in hotels, the public didn't realise that you still had to flush the chains in every toilet every day. You had to run the showers because of fear of Legionellas, or in older buildings for fear of it all falling down. From an insurance perspective, you needed people in there. You couldn't just shut it up. So, yeah, and I think those that have tweaked their business models, maybe staff retention models and various other things around their business since COVID, are ones that tend to be doing better now. Little did we know that there was going to be hyperinflation and wars and various other things to compound matters. And Brexit. But, in reality, I think a lot of hotels are doing, the ones that are doing very well, a lot of it, I think, will go back to what they learned through COVID and how they tweak their businesses.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, well, I mean, I suppose you're a busy man. You've got a lot going on by the sounds of it, and not just within your kind of day-to-day businesses, but you do extracurricular stuff as well. You're involved with the Savoy Educational Trust, as an example. Where do you find the time?
It's hard. For me, a lot of the stuff I do on the side, like Savoy Educational Trust, Beta, ASAP, and Tourism Lines, I can only do because the team that I work with are really good. They afford me the time to do it. And also, I think all of the things I'm involved with also help the business. Savoy Educational Trust is that extra layer because from an early part of my career, I've always given young people opportunities. And when Howard, who's the chair of it, approached me to be on the trust, I was a bit shocked, but also very, very proud. And the Savoy Educational Trust does amazing things for an awful lot of people that I had no real idea, because I didn't come through the traditional master in-holders and various other things. That brand I never saw it.
Yeah.
And then when I started hearing about it a bit more, and now I'm involved with it, it's phenomenal, like amazing stuff that's done, and so many people of all ages that really can get an impact from it. But yeah, I compartmentalize things. I block stuff out. We tend to, with all the association stuff, we put board meetings a year in advance. You know, I sit on the board with Tourism Alliance with Kate Nichols, who's probably even more busy than I am. You know, you make the time for it. And I can multitask pretty well as well. So I've learned how to flip from like Savoy Educational Trust to a meeting with an American university fairly seamlessly.
Right.
It's taken me time, and Outlook and the calendar is a godsend. I always say to people, if it's in the calendar, I'll be there. But I think because of technology now, it's a lot easier to do more things if you use the technology properly.
Yeah, well, and you can still manage your time. That's the thing that doesn't. If you're getting time back because you're not having to travel to places, the risk is then that you just fill your time with stuff.
Yes.
But yeah, look, really good to chat. I feel like we might have to do a part 2 at some point, because I know we're both got things that we need to go off to do. But final thing before I let you go, what would be your 3 main reasons as to why somebody should join hospitality as a career?
I think, and I've probably proved it, having worked in restaurants, hostels, hotels, apartments and student accommodation, is that it's not just working in a big brand on reception. There's this huge amounts of different career opportunities within hospitality. And we're just talking front of house. You forget about back of house now. Even data science for revenue management is pretty amazing. 2, I think, and it's probably been said on lots of your podcasts, is the people, and the fact that you can be in a really global environment in one building or one business is amazing. And I've learned so much about different cultures and countries, you know, that I've never visited. Our marketing manager here is from Armenia. We had a Diwali breakfast this morning with some amazing samosas brought in by one of the guys whose mum had sent them over to us. You know, it's that sort of thing, which I don't think you get in a lot of businesses or industries. And 3 for me has been travel. And so in my role, I get to travel a lot now to the States. But when I was running hotels, I used to go to trade shows all over the place. And a bit like Bourdain used to say, is travel enriches your life and your brain. And I think it allows you to do that. It's a really global career that it can take you where you want it to go. So those are the 3 things.
Amen to that. Stephen, thank you so much for coming on the show. I'm glad we got there in the end to do this.
Yeah.
I wish you guys all the very best with everything that you've got going on. So many things going on. And look forward to bumping into you at an event in the future, no doubt.
Yeah, well, thank you very much for inviting me.
You're very, very welcome. Have a good one.
And there we have it. What a cracking journey Stephen has, and even though he is hailed from generations of hospitalitarians, he still had to go carve out his own path and passion. We'll be back as usual at 8 PM next Wednesday for another story from hospitality, so until then, thanks so much for listening, and we'll see you next week.